Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Saltworks podcast. I'm your host, Hallie Dye. I can't wait to share this conversation with you today. We're doing something a little different these next 2 weeks, which is we're diving into Jessika McKaskle's story today, especially in terms of struggle with control and self-sufficiency and how that played out with her walk with the Lord and how that can affect our other relationships. And then next week, we will go more into the practical things we can do in marriage to combat those things. So I can't wait to share this conversation with you today. Make sure you come back for part 2 as well next week. But before we jump into the conversation, I want to tell you about some partners that we have for this episode. We all know how busy the fall can be. We're running the roads with sports, school, work, travel, you name it. There isn't always time to cook or meal prep. That's why Daily Press has fast and friendly service for your busy schedule with their made-to-order deli options for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What you might not know is for your busiest days, their fresh and grab-go options in the open air cooler and a wide variety of frozen take-home meals and appetizers. We can't forget about the baked good options also, and the fresh brewed coffee, let's be honest. Daily Press has 4 locations, making it convenient for you and your family, and they're open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at all but one location. Plus, it's a family-owned business, so stop by Daily Press today. Parents, if you haven't heard of the newest children's book, you need to join Kip, a brave little box turtle, as he learns to overcome his fears through the power of prayer and trusting in God. When faced with unexpected challenges, Kip discovers that he's never alone. Centered around the verse Psalm 56:3, "When I'm afraid, I will trust in you," this book teaches children the importance of faith and the strength that comes from praying when they feel scared. Perfect for bedtime stories for family reading time, Kip, the brave little turtle, inspires young hearts to be brave, just like Kip. This book is best for any boy or girl between the ages of 4 and 8 years old. It can be purchased from Amazon or the author's site at upfromthemuck.com. Local author and podcast host Brandy Bostic also exclusively sells the Kip plush doll, which makes a fun and cuddly addition to the book. The plush doll, along with other merchandise, can be found on her website, upfromthemuck.com. No one wants to have to be making hard medical decisions, and there can be so many we don't know what to do. But in those moments, know that one easy decision is Northeast Imaging. They are a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor-trusted and patient-preferred. They offer MRI, CT, X-ray, and ultrasound. Their friendly staff provides high-quality scans focusing on the delivery of exemplary care to the patient and their referring providers. It doesn't matter if you're using your health care or you're paying out of pocket, they're almost always more affordable than local hospitals. The facility is conveniently located at 1703 Lammy Lane here in Monroe. They're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So mark that decision off your list and tell your healthcare provider you want to go to Northeast Imaging. And now to part 1 of my conversation with Jessika. Jessika, welcome to the Saltworks podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I am very excited. I don't even know 100% what you're going to share, and I'm excited about that. Truly. I just know it's going to be good either way, and you're here on your day off, so thank you.
Yes, of course. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to be able to be a part of this and just allowing me to share my story and who I am and how the Lord's been working in it.
Yeah. I'm super excited, selfishly for me, and also to get to share it with others too.
You're
Um,
so nice.
well, I mean it. I'm not always nice, but I do mean that. Um, So, who is Jessika McKaskle for people who know you or don't? Maybe not don't know everything.
Sure. Well, I am Jessika McKaskle, and first and foremost, I am the daughter of Jesus, and he has been the king of my life for a long time.
Mm.
But around here, I'm mostly known for being Jordy's wife. Jordy is my husband.
Mm.
And so if you know Jordy, well, you know Jordy. And with a name like that, it's hard to forget. But it is my honor to be his wife also. And I am a mother to Piper and Haddon. That's a new role for people who live in Louisiana, know me.
Mhm.
And I am also a travel agent and I help people with their vacations. And I'm also a speech therapist.
Yeah, that's a lot of hats.
It is a lot of hats. Yes.
Well, it's been a while since you've worked in speech, right? How long has it been since because you just started back?
Sort of.
Yeah, okay.
So when I was here last,
Mhm.
Jordy and I lived here. Well, we moved away 10 years ago. So
I
it's
couldn't
been,
remember what year you moved.
we moved in 2014.
Okay.
And so it has literally been 10 years
Yeah.
since we lived here last.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had literally just graduated with my master's degree in speech therapy.
Gotcha.
And so when we moved to Oklahoma at that time, then I worked at different things. I was in private practice, I worked in a school, and um, yeah, that's pretty much what I did at that time.
Mhm.
And then we moved back to Louisiana. I was working in speech therapy, but as a virtual therapist. So
Gotcha.
I worked for a parish that was 100% virtual, not 100%, but like 80,
Mhm.
80-20.
Yeah.
Um, and so I did that for a while and it was great and it was an awesome experience. And then when we moved to Monroe, um, this position became available for the school system. And I was like, okay, let's
Yeah.
give it a whirl. So
Yeah.
that's what we're
That's
doing.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. But new hats, new things, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's exciting though.
Yeah. It has been cool.
Well, we're also excited because, for some people who don't know you, y'all just moved back to this part of Louisiana, and
Yes.
we're selfishly excited about that. I know some people are sad about that,
Sure.
but yeah, so lots of new in your life
Hmm.
and in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Definitely. Monroe has always felt like home for Jordy and I.
mhm,
And so when we moved back here, it just literally felt like home for us.
yeah,
But it was also a new home. It was so familiar to us,
right.
but so much is different.
Yeah.
People are different. The town is different.
You weren't a mom when you
I
moved because
wasn't a,
Piper would she have been born in 2014 or 15?
she was born in 2015. So
Okay.
uh, this, when we were literally leaving, like there was a going away party for us in Bastrop and this whole thing, I was probably 6 weeks pregnant with Piper, and nobody here knew. I could
Yeah.
not even fathom telling anybody that
Yeah.
I was pregnant, and I was like, "Bye, I'm leaving." It was, which is why I was extra emotional during that whole time, is
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
was so sad. I was newly pregnant, and I couldn't tell
Mhm.
anybody here because
Yeah.
it would just been so heartbreaking in addition to us moving away. So
Right.
Piper was born in 2015. She just turned 9 this summer.
Okay. I
Hmm.
knew she was a little bit older than Bear, but I didn't know like 6 months, a couple
Yeah.
months, year. But he just turned 9 as well. So
Yeah.
he was also 2015. Yeah.
Hmm.
I knew they were kind of close. Um, okay. So you and I went back and forth. Like, I knew for sure we wanted to have you. That was not a question in my mind. But the question for you was, do you want to share your story? You want to share parts of your testimony? Do you want to share about some topics you're passionate about? Like, what do you like? Where do you feel like the Lord's like leading you? And I think you kind of landed in a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Do you want to kind of share like those topics, or you want me to set that up?
I can talk about it.
Yeah.
So, when you initially asked me what to talk about,
Yeah.
I I came up with kind of two different ideas, and then while I was thinking about those things, the Lord was very much like, "Hey, both of these really go hand in hand in
Yeah.
this way." And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Okay." So really, we're going to be talking about perfectionism
Mm-hmm.
within myself and marriage and how that plays out and has played out within my marriage,
Yeah.
and kind of the developments of both. Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense?
Yes. So going into those, would you set some background for us? Like I said, when I asked who's Jessika McKaskle, like some people know you and feel like they know you well, but they
Yeah,
don't know your background.
sure.
They don't know the things you brought into marriage or into adulthood even,
Sure.
and same thing with Jordy. Like we can assume we know, but we don't see
Yeah.
everything. So even for people who know you, but especially for those who don't, like what did that look like, Jordy and Jessica come together?
So Jordy and Jessica go way back.
Yeah.
Jordy and I have been married for 15 years.
Mm.
We just celebrated that this summer, which seems
Congratulations.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like are we old enough for 15 years of marriage?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it feels like. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but I am originally from Oklahoma,
Mhm.
and Jordy is originally from West Monroe. So you're thinking like, how did this come together? Like,
Mhm.
what happened?
Mhm.
So back in the day when I was in student ministry, I was 15 years old, and that summer we were going to come to Louisiana and West Monroe at a camp called Frontliners.
Mhm.
It does not exist anymore, the camp.
Yeah.
So, essentially, what happened is that Jordy's home church, at the time Mount Vernon, um, hosted churches from all over who wanted to attend the camp.
Yeah.
Then the members of the church would host campers. So,
Mhm.
like, it was like me and two other girls from my
Yeah.
church who would stay with somebody.
Yeah.
Well, that person that I stayed with just so happens to be Jordy's sister.
Wow,
And
I never knew that.
yeah, so she housed me and two other girls
Mhm.
for the time that we were at the camp. And at the time, my mother in law and sister in law lived very near one another. And so we would all kind of just, Jordy's mom had, friends over that were Jordy's. And so we just all connected. Like we would have
Mhm.
dinner together or we'd just hang out or whatever.
Yeah.
And so obviously I was at church camp to learn more about Jesus and, really dive deep there, uh, which is not at all what I was doing.
I love the heavy foreshadowing and
I was not there at all I was just trying to get a week away,
Yeah.
as a teenager. And so I literally was like, yeah, I mean, if the Lord moved in my life, that's fine, but I'm really here to see
Mm.
the boy selection
Mhm.
and what's available. So, because Jordy's church was the host church, he was in a lot of leadership roles at that time. And
Yeah.
so I constantly saw him around and very quickly caught my attention.
Mhm.
But like Jordy wasn't paying me attention. And that is not what I was used to at this point. And so I kept asking his sister, I was like, what is your brother's problem? Like, why is he not interested in me? He will tell you that he knew what kind of girl I was, and that, um, he knew that any guy that came by, gave me the attention that I wanted, and he just wasn't going to do that. But in
Mhm.
my perspective, that summer, he had surrendered his life to the ministry. So he was like Paul in it, where, he was like, I don't need a wife. And I'm, like, I am.
Hauling.
I
You
am
know,
totally focused on the ministry life,
sometimes I struggle with Paul. Like, I feel like there are like whole books in the Christian walk of like, hey, like, let's talk about Paul.
Yeah.
Because there's a reason why he was stoned so many times.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so it felt like Jordy was, trying to figure out this calling on his life.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, hey, like, you want to go on a date? So,
Mhm.
um, but he did
Sorry.
towards the end of the camp kind of pay me some attention,
Mhm.
but not a lot, which caused me to want to know him more.
Yeah.
And so we kept in touch after that for a little while. I made him like bandana bracelets. They were
The
matching.
best. Did you ever do the bandana choker?
Not
Oh,
at that time.
I was next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I left him with 4 colored
Yeah.
bandana bracelets that matched mine.
Yeah.
The camp actually was like hosted not at Mount Vernon, but at Westridge Middle School.
Okay.
And so we have this picture literally today on our fridge of what was then a selfie. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, with my disposable camera,
Yes.
you know.
The original selfie.
Yes. And in the background, you can see the Westridge Tower. And so it is
That's so
literally on the
cool.
front of the school. And so,
Yeah.
anyway, fast forward, some time went by. Jordy dated some people. I dated some people. We kind of lost contact.
Mhm.
And then in 2006, I graduated high school and I went to college. And at that time, there's this little thing called Facebook where
Right.
you had to have a .edu email to get into
Right.
Facebook, right?
Yes. College only at
Yes.
that point.
So at this point in my life, I was pumped because not only was I a freshman in college, but like I had access
Right.
now to Facebook because I had a .edu email
Mhm.
address. And so I got on Facebook and, again, he and I both were in relationships at this time. And then you know how Facebook does. It's like, oh, mutual friends. And so
Right.
I had this mutual friend with him and it was like, you may know Jordy McCaskle. And I was like,
I
let's just
might.
let's just see if I know Jordy McCaskle. And so I clicked on his profile and
Mhm.
he looked the exact same that I had ever remembered him being. And I was like, add as friend. And so it just started out with like, hey, how's it going? Happy birthday,
Mhm.
blah, 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 blah. Well, then it very quickly turned into private messaging.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Right. It was writing on the wall and then it turned
Yeah.
into,
Oh, and the wall used to be like a letter
yeah.
filled with like inside jokes. Like the more inside jokes, the better. That
Yes.
was a flex.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I forgot about that.
Forget about that stage,
Oh, man.
and
It's so different now.
that led into a lot of things,
Yeah.
because there was some drama.
And like poking. Couldn't you
Yeah,
poke too?
what even is that? And you never even saw those
Oh
notifications
no.
until it's like 6 months later, and you're like, "That's weird. What did that even mean?" You know?
Right. Right.
That's hilarious.
And so at this point in time, like we weren't dating anybody. We had just
Mhm.
come out of relationships. We really weren't even looking to have a relationship at that point.
Mhm.
Because I mean, he lived in Louisiana and I lived in Oklahoma. Like
Right.
this was not really going to work out. And so then before I knew it, Jordy was asking for my number and then we were texting and,
Mhm.
like having phone conversations. And then, so by this time I, had changed colleges. Welcome to that whole other
Yeah. Yeah.
conversation. And so I was now, attending OU. This was my sophomore year of college.
Mhm.
Um, and I was living with two other girls that were my friends. And,
Mhm.
um, the next thing I know, Jordy is now working. I don't know if he was at Calvary at the time because he started at like Calvary, like over kind of by like Washoe High School,
Yeah.
Calvary,
Mhm.
at the very beginning. Because I think that was he graduated high school in like 2004.
Okay.
So probably very quickly thereafter, he started out there.
Gotcha.
And then Steve Spence called
Mhm.
Jordy to be the junior high associate pastor, probably in like 2006 or so, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know where he was at the time, but I know he was working. So I can't remember if it was
Had started there
had
or
started at
still
North
here.
Monroe or
Yeah.
was still there or whatever, because he was only there for a short time.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, the next thing you know, like he's asking to come visit me in Oklahoma. And because by this time my parents were freaking out because I was interested in this guy in Louisiana. Like
Yeah. Yeah. They're looking down the pipe at
yeah.
where's this going?
Yeah. And they, this was like before Live 360. This
Yeah.
was like, they pretty much were like, you cannot drive down there, like,
Mhm.
because you'd be by yourself and like
Yeah.
what
We
happened.
don't know this person.
Yes, it was a whole thing. So, Jordy came to Norman and he drove up in his Ford F-150 with LSU all over the front of it, just like right down the middle of
Mhm.
campus.
Mhm.
And he looked the exact same as I had ever remembered him being. And I
Yeah.
was so nervous. And
Mhm.
after that, like that was it. Like we
Yeah.
constantly were talking to one another. We were on the phone for hours.
Mhm.
And we did that for just over a year or so.
Yeah.
Because at that point we were like, we're going to get married. Like,
Yeah.
we're not doing this too much longer,
I
you know?
feel like dating long distance like forces two things. One, you to really think about plans
Oh, yeah.
because you can't escape the fact that like we don't live in the same
Oh,
place.
yeah.
So we both have these feelings and what does that look
Sure.
like logistically? And two, like you have to get to know this person. You can't go sit in a dark movie theater and
Oh,
then be like, oh,
no.
that was a date.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. But
Sure.
like you have to get to know them. That's all you have.
Yeah. Like just this like sporadic Walmart trip or Target trip or
Hmm.
whatever did not exist.
No.
And like we were totally dependent on
Hmm.
the phone.
Yeah.
And And so I think by the time we started dating, Jordy was at North Monroe,
Yeah.
um, because it was it was constantly like Jordy was like, "Hey Warren, can I be gone? I've got to go. Like I'm going to Oklahoma." And so Warren was always like, "What is in Oklahoma?" Like
Uncle Warren.
Uncle Warren, like for sure. And so Jordy would literally leave. I mean, because he's going to ULM at this time too.
Right.
And so he would, I don't know what his class schedule was like on a Friday, but he would like either go to class and or finish out work or whatever. And then he would drive like 8 hours
Yeah.
to campus.
Mhm.
And then like he had to be at work on Sunday morning. And so
Mhm.
like he would leave at like 3 in the morning or something like this to make it back in time to
Yeah.
go to work. And like we did this all the time. And it
Mhm.
was insanity.
Yeah.
Um, I would I was working at the time also. And so I bought my own plane ticket, and my
Mhm.
parents were like, "Why didn't we think of that? Like, why
Mhm.
didn't we forbid her from buying a
Yeah.
plane ticket?" And so my dad later on was like, "Man, yeah, that was, you outsmarted us on that one."
Yeah.
Like, so I would fly to Monroe from
Mhm.
Oklahoma just to visit him on different times
Mhm.
that we could.
Yeah.
And so when we were together, we just like spent every waking moment together
Yeah.
because we didn't have that time
Mhm.
any other time,
Yeah.
you know? So it was crazy.
Andrew and I were also long distance when we started dating for almost 2 years.
Yeah,
And so, like, not as separated because, like, his
sure.
family was here. He didn't come home a whole lot, but I mean, but I can relate at the same time to like the intentionality that that forces you to have.
Hmm.
You don't know that you have to be intentional, but looking back, like you do,
Oh, yeah.
And so in some ways, like that can set you up for, building some good intentional habits in marriage, but
Hmm.
I also wonder, like, what do you feel like you and Jordy brought into, like, as far as expectations that were totally
Oh,
different?
gosh. So it seemed like so Jordy and I, after we dated for about that year, we got married in 2009,
Hmm.
and I moved to Louisiana.
Yeah.
Now, if you know anything about Jordy's story, he had been gone from North Monroe for about a year. So from like 2008 to 2009, he was serving in a different area of Louisiana. So we got married that July. We lived in that place for a month, and
Hmm.
then we came back to Monroe.
Wow, I don't think I realized that.
This is our third time back to Monroe.
That's hilarious. You can't get far, can you?
Like
You keep
we
trying.
we're done. We're done. Like we should have just stayed here this whole time. Like,
The Lord has spoken.
yes. And so we got married in literally the only date available according to the North Monroe Student Ministry schedule, which was July 25th, 2009. So
That's so funny.
then I moved here and continued going to college and that sort of thing. But everybody's always kind of like, "Oh, well, Louisiana and Oklahoma, they're not really that different," but they really are.
Mm,
Oklahomans would consider that state to be a southern state,
yeah,
but like Louisianans would not consider Oklahoma to be a southern state,
yeah,
which is kind of like a more midwestern sort of
right.
area. But like they still say y'all, but it's like we say pop and not Coke. Like,
Yeah,
what do you want to
yeah.
drink? We want pop.
Mhm.
So my kids kind of get
It's where
confused.
things start to shift,
Yes. So
as we
really,
go further north.
yes, it's this language, like cultural language. Like
Yeah.
Jordy would ask me to cut the light on. I didn't know what that meant. I turned the light on.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's really as basic as that, but it caused a lot of like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like
yeah.
I'm finna, I'm finna something, something, something. I had no
Or
idea what that.
fixing to.
I am
I'm fixing
fixing
to.
to
Yeah.
what? So
What are you fixing?
I had no idea what a lot of those terms
Yeah.
meant. And so that created us again to be like, what do you mean? Tell me more about what you're trying to say to me. So it
Mhm.
feels like communication has just been this overall
Yeah.
barking idea of, we had to communicate early on so we could even know about one another, right? To learn
Right.
who each other were. And
Yeah.
now at this point in our marriage, we're like, okay, we're trying to perform these daily tasks in our lives and like schedule and what, but like I have no
Mhm.
idea what you mean.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and so that, created a different dynamic there. And then, both my parents and my in-laws have been married for a substantial amount of time. I think
Mhm.
my parents are like close to 50 years.
Wow.
Jordy's parents were married for probably the same, if not a little bit more. I mean, Jordy's
Mhm.
parents got married when they were 18.
Wow.
And so like we have really, 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 really been lucky
Yeah.
that we come from families that have that base of
Mhm.
enduring
Yeah.
one another
Yeah.
and commitment and um, just doing that for a long time. And
Right.
so we know that that's a gift.
Yeah.
And so,
And
uh,
rare.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So, we just really had to learn how to communicate with one another,
Yeah.
from the get-go.
Mhm.
And so we, we just kinda did the best we can. We moved here. I ate all the new foods. My mouth was flaming hot all the time. There were so many
Yeah.
bugs here.
Yeah.
It's so muggy and humid, and my curly hair at the time, I was just straightening the mess out of it,
Yeah.
and it was just, like, blowing up. And so, like, it just felt like a different world here for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Um, and it was in a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so, but Jordy at that time was my family.
Mhm.
I didn't have any other family here. Jordy's one of three, and I think that his brother and sister lived near. But I mean,
Mhm.
one thing that you've got to know about Jordy and I coming into marriage is
Yeah.
that we're essentially baby only children. So,
Mhm.
what this means is that we are the last of our siblings and we're the youngest by a substantial amount of years.
Yeah. So
So,
you had a youngest and an only child experience.
yes.
Yeah.
So, like, I have an older sister
Mhm.
who's 7.5 years older than me.
Mhm.
Mom, had trouble staying pregnant and all the things. And so
Mhm.
she didn't ever want it to be that way, but that's what the Lord gave her. And
Yeah.
so, um, and then Jordy has a brother and a sister that are like 12 and 10 years older than him.
Mhm.
And so, like,
Mhm.
our nieces and nephews today are like 22,
Yeah.
24. Like,
Mhm.
they're married, some have kids. Like, we're great aunts and uncles.
Yeah. That's wild.
you know? But we've also
Eh,
been an aunt and uncle since we were like in 6th grade,
right. Yeah.
So, like, we have this whole dynamic. So
Father of the
essentially,
bride.
yeah. So essentially, my parents and Jordy's parents have like separate grandchildren,
Yeah.
like Piper and
Mhm.
Haddon are 9 and 7. And
Right.
so we're in the thick of elementary
Yes.
school and baseball and theater and art and basketball. And we're not
Losing
driving.
teeth and yes, it's yeah.
Yeah. We
Uh-huh.
don't have cell phones and
Right.
cars and all of the stuff. So
Mhm. Yeah.
it's essentially like this literally like separate
I feel
children.
like that's a rare dynamic too. Because I feel like a lot of times you see older sibling marries younger sibling.
Yes.
You rarely ever see two middle, two
Yes.
maybe,
Yes.
there are some, but like that's,
Oh, yeah,
it's funny.
for sure.
I want to ask you about like what has perfectionism looked like in your life because we can all like say to some extent that we've struggled with perfectionism, but like our idea of what
Mm,
perfection is in our life looks different.
yeah.
So like how has that played out in your life and how did that affect your marriage?
So perfectionism to me, and know that at this point in my life, I would have never said that I was a perfectionist, and I would
Mhm.
never said that I was someone in control. Okay, those were not things that I would have described myself
Yeah.
as.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes people think perfectionism is synonymous with type A, not that
Yes,
you're not, I don't know if you are or not, but like it
it's
can,
evolved.
yeah, same. And motherhood will do that.
Yeah.
But like, I think sometimes people can think it's synonymous with like having all your ducks in a row.
Yes.
It's got to be color coded. It's got to be whatever. It's got
Right.
to, and like it that isn't actually what perfectionism
No,
always
no,
manifests itself as.
definitely. Perfectionism for me
Yeah.
was control.
Mm.
I wanted control, ultimate, like the most control
Mhm.
over everything and everybody. I
Mhm.
wanted it over Jordy. I wanted it over myself. I
Mhm.
wanted it over Jordy's friends and Jordy's job and our home. And, Piper was a baby by now.
Mhm.
Um, and, that's when I so it really wasn't until like year 7
Mm.
into our marriage. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, the first few years are terrible." Well, for us,
Yeah.
it's great
Yeah.
because we hadn't seen each other. We had never spent this most time
Mhm.
with one another as we were right at that moment.
Yeah.
And so, like, year 7 was the
Mhm.
year that we moved from Louisiana,
Yeah.
and we were moving at the time back to Oklahoma. And like I said before, I was newly pregnant with Piper, and so things were changing
Mhm. Mhm.
in a really
Rapid way.
big way. I
Yeah.
had just graduated with my master's degree in speech therapy. Um, I I was starting a new job right out of college. I was becoming a
Mhm.
mother. We were changing states. We were
Yeah.
changing homes. And I needed some kind of consistency there. And
Mhm.
so that manifested itself with control.
Yeah.
And I was like, it is literally my way or no way.
Mhm.
And I didn't care who came along. It didn't matter if I hurt your feelings. It didn't matter, like, nothing mattered
Mhm.
except that the way that you would change Piper's diaper, like, literally to that degree is
Mhm.
where I was
Yeah.
because I needed that stability.
Mhm.
I craved that predictability,
Yeah.
right? And so it was very, like, if it didn't look a certain way, then
Mhm.
I wasn't doing it
Yeah.
at all because the risk of failure to me
Mhm.
was insurmountable, right?
Yeah.
Like, it would have been devastating had I attempted to do something and failed,
Yeah.
or it didn't pan out
Mhm.
in that way, right?
I think too, I don't know if this like is relatable to you, but I think sometimes like for instance, I at some point in life need to have some alone time to recharge.
Oh, yeah.
The amount of time and how often
Yeah.
has diminished as I am refined by marriage and motherhood and
Mhm.
work and what
Yeah.
have you. But at some point, and when there is a lot of heaviness and a lot of change and there's none of that, I can almost like it can almost feel like like life is being mean. Like life is
Oh,
being
yeah.
mean. And you kind of get to this wounded animal of like you feel I think if you could verbalize how you feel when like this thing that you do have a need, like it's not always a bad desire
Sure.
to want some semblance
Yeah.
of control or
Oh,
some,
yeah.
autonomy or whatever
Mhm.
that looks like, but it can just feel like my needs are not being met and no one cares.
And that man, that just, like, supercharged me.
Right.
What
Especially in the areas that you're like, "Well, I am this child's mother."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I know.
Yeah.
I know what's best for her
Mhm.
at all cost,
Mhm.
and I know Jordy better than you. And so, like,
Mm.
I know what to do.
Yeah.
And in
That's
re
hard as a pastor's wife.
yeah, let's just add that on top of that too.
Yeah.
Like, who is Jessika
Mm.
McKaskle? Like, you know,
Eh.
it just, that creates this fishbowl
Mhm.
life, right? And so I felt this pressure,
Yeah.
not from Jordy,
Right.
um, to perform
Mm.
and to be said person.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you what that would be. Like, I didn't even know
Yeah.
what that looks like, but I
Mhm.
was going to be it
Right.
because I had to,
Mhm. Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. Right.
like
Yeah.
at that time. And a lot of people where, you mentioned like a lot of people, need to find rest and retrieve and
Mhm.
alone. At that time in my life, that was, I didn't need to be by myself. It was insulting if you considered asking me, "Hey, like, you just wanna, like, go by yourself," and, like, I didn't
Yeah.
live around family, okay?
Mhm.
Like, at that time, my parents still even lived over an hour away. I mean,
Yeah.
My mom kept Piper off and on a little bit at the beginning,
Mhm.
but, like, we didn't have someone that was super close to us
Yeah.
at that time as far as family is concerned, and so
Mhm.
the idea of me stepping back and saying, "Oh, I need to retrieve and I need to, like,
Mhm.
regroup," was I wasn't tired.
Mhm.
I didn't need that.
Mhm.
I was fine,
Mhm.
Hallie,
Yeah.
okay? I was fine.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, like, I was good. I
Yeah.
could just take a nap when Piper was taking a
Yeah.
nap. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't need someone else's help or
Mhm.
concern. I had it together and it was fine.
Yeah. What did having it together end up meaning sacrifice in other areas?
A whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
Um, so I, put this expectation unknowingly at the time on
Mhm.
myself of what I needed to look like and how I needed to act and how I needed to parent. And,
Mhm.
you know, did I, encourage Jordy to go out in ministry or was I critical and nagging and
Mhm.
complaining? But at the same time, like, I spent my life making sure that nothing would fray.
Mhm.
It felt like this never ending rope where I was always trying to catch it to
Mhm.
make sure that the end didn't come
Mhm.
and that it
Unraveled.
just completely come apart. And
Yeah.
so, you've seen the movie Inside Out, I'm sure,
Mhm.
with children.
Yeah.
And Inside Out too, we're talking about anxiety. Like anxiety is present, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like when anxiety is running around the control panel trying to like fix all the things, then it just
Mhm.
turns into like hyperspeed. And then it
Mhm.
looks like a full blown anxiety attack, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, that's what happened to me. I
Mhm.
was not in a space where I was hearing,
Yeah.
"Hey, let me help you." I mean, and Jordy was that person. Like, he was like, "Hey, let me stay home with the kids and you go out
Mhm.
with friends or just
Mhm.
go to Sonic by yourself." I mean, hello, early motherhood.
Yeah.
you
I
know?
spent a lot of hours at Sonic.
and you just sit there in your car in
Yeah.
silence.
Yeah.
But like, I
Mhm.
didn't, I, I didn't allow him to serve me in that way.
Mhm.
And so I, what ended up happening was that I was exhausted. I was completely burned out on all fronts.
Mhm.
Being Jordy's wife, being a pastor's wife, being a mom, a new mom,
Mhm.
being a human being. Like,
Yeah.
I was completely burned out.
Yeah.
It seems like a fog almost that I'm functioning in this area, and some of it I can't remember
Mhm.
because the supercharge was so intense at the time
Yeah.
that I was literally running around like a crazy person,
Yeah.
just totally out of control.
Mhm.
And that's what it felt like was total lack of control. I wasn't the best mother to my baby. She needed me for different things, and I was obsessing about all the things with her,
Mhm.
as it happens a lot with first
Oh,
time moms.
all moms. Yeah.
We just hyper fixate on
Mhm.
caring and
I That's one of the first chapters of my book,
yeah.
that still isn't out. You're Still a Good Mom. Shameless plug, pre-order. But I don't know if I've ever said that on the podcast, actually.
Hey.
I do have a book that's launching soon. But one of the first chapters is talking about, like, what if we're not failing at what we were meant to be, but what if we're failing at what we thought
Yeah.
we were meant to be? And that's a really big question. Like, it sounds, oh, that's a cute little succinct thing, but,
Sure.
like, no, like, do you know
Oh yeah.
what that means? And that's in the realm of motherhood, but also in the realm of being a human and a Christian and a wife,
Yeah.
a
Oh
pastor's
yeah.
wife. Like, how
Yeah.
are you actually failing at what God's called you to do?
Yeah.
Or do you just feel like you're failing at what you thought
Yeah.
it was supposed to look
Oh
like?
yeah. And in the meantime, in this part of my life, in the meantime, I had a husband who felt completely rejected by me,
Mm,
very distant from me, to the point where it was like we were living in this house together,
yeah.
but we didn't really know what was
Mhm.
going on with one another.
Well, and like when we feel that anxious, and everyone can relate to this for different, however you've gotten here in marriage,
Mhm.
when you feel so anxious and so inside yourself about what you need to be,
Oh,
what
yeah.
you need to handle, what you need to carry, there's this emotional distance
Mhm.
from yourself and everyone else. And like
Yeah.
you can't really see
Oh, no.
that that's what it feels like when you're
Right.
inside of it. You don't have time to self assess because you're in crisis mode,
Oh, no.
but, like, that it feels very lonely
Yeah.
outside of it, and we've
Mhm.
all been on both sides of that, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Mhm.
But yeah.
It's one of those things too for me that it's like I didn't know what I was doing to others in the meantime
Mm,
and to myself,
yeah.
really. Um, and it was kind of creating this this separation
Mhm.
between Jordy and I. He was literally functioning and doing what he needed to do for work and being a new dad um like attempting to help me, but every time he would like reach out to me, it was like I smacked him on the hand, like, get away
Mhm.
from me.
Yeah.
Like, don't I am fine. Don't
Mhm.
touch me. I can't be close to you until I'm fine,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
And
When I
it
get this under control, I will then connect.
right. And that played out even further to my relationship with the Lord. Like
Yeah.
everything else was crumbling around. I wasn't having my quiet time. I wasn't spending time with the Lord. I was going to church because remember, I'm married to someone in the ministry. Like
Mhm.
skipping church is you don't do that because
Mhm.
then the church members would know like what's going on. Are
Mhm.
they okay? Like I couldn't do that. So I was showing up and I was going through the motions and doing all the things.
Yeah.
And my relationship with the Lord at that time was very distant.
Mm.
So I felt like, okay,
Right,
let me
right.
make that very clear is that
Yeah.
that's how I was feeling. That was not the reality
Mhm.
of what was happening,
Yeah.
but it is how I felt,
Right.
you know.
How did that, like, was there a moment where that came to a head and you thought, "Okay, this isn't this isn't real. My ever elusive illusion of keeping things under control isn't real."
Yeah.
Was that a slow thing? Was that a, oh my goodness, hit me head on at a moment? What did that look like?
So up until, this time, I I just very much thought that I could get it, like
Mm,
eventually, like if the bar was here, I could get there eventually, So
right.
like it wasn't that I thought, that it was like this one said moment.
Mhm.
It was really like a whole cultivation of things that was like gonna happen before a really big thing in our life that would come later on.
Yeah.
And so what happened was Matt Barnhill, like, if you know
Yeah.
Matt, because
Uh-huh.
from
From the marriage retreat.
yes,
Yeah.
great friend of Bill's, the whole
Yeah.
thing. Well, he did a marriage retreat when we lived in Ellick, and so
Mhm.
now this was like not I didn't know him at the time, but
Yeah, that was my first time to hear
he
him and his
said this quote at the last retreat that I went there, and he said, "If you aren't discerning in your marriage, you are drifting and you don't even know it." I at
Yeah.
that time, so that quote for me happened probably a couple years ago,
Mhm.
but that's how my life was.
Mhm.
I wasn't investing in my marriage. I wasn't being intentional in my marriage. I
Mhm.
was drifting in my marriage
Yeah.
and I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so it had, it's this slow fade, right? Like Jordy and I just didn't wake up one day and we were just these totally separate people.
Mhm.
It was a culmination of things. Like,
Yeah.
and because my perfectionism looked like it had to be this certain way or it didn't happen.
Mhm.
That also panned out with dating Jordy, having sex with Jordy, being close with him, just as far as like what was going on internally,
Mhm.
both mentally
Mhm.
and emotionally.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't have those things together and if it didn't look and act and play out in a certain way, then I didn't do it, which caused an immense amount of rejection on him.
Mm.
It made him feel like I wasn't interested in him and that he wasn't good enough for me
Mhm.
and that, like what was he doing wrong? And it just but that's not at all what I was trying
Right.
to
I was gonna
say.
say, isn't that just like the
Mhm.
enemy for him to whisper lies in your ear of you're not worthy, you're
Oh,
not
yeah.
enough, you've got to get it
Mhm.
together in order to be the wife that's able to do these things.
Definitely.
But through you're not just coming as you are, as one like he's hearing the opposite,
Yes.
like
Yes.
isn't that just like the enemy's
A
voice?
100%. 100%. And so in this time, the Lord was preparing our hearts to move again.
Mm.
And at this time, so when we left North Monroe, my first time, Jordy's second time, we left in 2014 and we moved to Oklahoma and we were there for a time. And
Mhm,
then we moved to Missouri. So we lived in Southwest Missouri at the time
mhm.
at the Joplin area. So year 7 happened when we lived in Joplin.
Okay.
Um, and at this time, we had been there for, I think, close to 4 or 5 years or something.
Okay.
And the Lord was starting to call us away from that church to a different church back in Oklahoma. So, like,
Yeah.
the map goes Oklahoma or Louisiana, Oklahoma, Missouri,
Mhm.
Oklahoma, southern Louis, like mid central Louisiana, and then back to Monroe. Like, it is literally this whole loop. Okay. Of the timeline of the McCaskles. But during that, the Lord over the years has always really spoken to me in song.
Mm,
And he is very, very intentional with that. I love music. I love listening to music.
yeah.
And at the time,
Can I just say that I love that you know that about yourself.
yeah,
I think sometimes people don't ask like, how do I feel like the Lord speaks to me? Not that he doesn't speak to
sure.
all of us through scripture and all of us through teaching and all of us through songs,
Yes.
but like for you to know like this has been impactful because
Mhm.
it changes the way of how you look for him,
Yeah.
you know?
And in these moments of change for me,
Yeah.
I know the song instantly.
Yeah.
And when I hear the song, even today, my mind goes back to that spot.
Yeah.
And so in this time, the Lord brought to me the song New Wine by Hillsong. It's a
Mm.
Hillsong song. I had to, I couldn't resist.
Yeah.
Um, and in this song, the lyrics say, in the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine.
Mm,
When I trust you, I don't need to understand. And like that changed me.
mm,
That need to understand also was the need for control,
mm.
right? I'm very practical. I'm very like, it is this way. Like, why would you do it this way? That doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
And so like I I needed to trust the Lord. Like I needed to understand what he was really saying of me,
Mm.
right? And but if I didn't understand it, then I wasn't going to do it.
Right.
And moving all the times that I've moved was never in my card deck. Okay. That is, my parents still live
Yeah.
in the home that I grew up in.
Yeah.
Okay. They moved a whole bunch prior to that, but I didn't move when I
Mhm.
was a kid or a teenager at all.
Yeah.
And so this idea of moving and trusting was extremely difficult
Yeah.
for me.
Well, and just the like I love efficiency. Like I
Yeah.
Lindsay will laugh at me. She gets this, but like I like it'll be like, "Hey, are you working from home today? Are you going to the office?" Whatever. And like so we'll just kind of keep up throughout the day because it's like, "Hey, I loaded this in a Google Drive if you'll check that."
Sure.
Like whatever. And so one day I was like, you know, just ran my errands and everything worked out exactly. And it was like, I feel seen by the Lord, because that doesn't
Yeah.
happen. It is a rare gift.
Sure. Yeah.
But like also like what I've had to learn, and I've heard multiple people say this. I remember Cody saying it one time, like he was teaching all the life groups of like, allow your time with the Lord. And I would add to that, like the way that you follow the Lord to
Yeah.
be unhurried and inefficient.
Oh man. I'm a schedule person. Like
Oh,
we are on schedule. I mean, I
yeah.
say that and I was late this morning. I was definitely behind
You've
schedule.
turned over a new leaf.
That
Yeah.
would not that would not have happened years
Evidence
ago.
of change.
Because it would have bothered me. I wouldn't have even shown up. I
Mm,
would have been like, Hallie, I can't do this. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna be late. I
yeah.
gotta go. I can't.
Mm.
Um, because it didn't look that way, right? Like it
Right.
didn't look this way. And so in that time of the new wine song that had been saying, I think at our church at that time,
Yeah.
um, it I realized that control and trust cannot coexist.
Mm.
Like, it is literally one or the other. I can't control.
Mm.
I mean, like, trusting is literally the lack of control. It's allowing someone else to decide what's better for me, right?
Yeah.
And like, I I never knew that. Like, I never knew that I needed to like, I couldn't control someone and trust someone at the same time.
Yeah.
I thought I could do both.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
because like I was doing a great job of that at this point.
Hmm.
So I thought,
Yeah.
you know. Um And so, like, these lyrics of, like, in this crushing and the pressing, wine, obviously, I'm not a wine drinker, like, I
Mm.
don't but to create wine, you have to take the grape, it has to be in the right condition, and you crush it down. It is
Mm.
no longer in the state that it was once in,
Yeah.
and so in order to get something new,
Yeah.
you have to endure pain and change and this shaping and molding within ourselves that God does for us,
Yeah.
right? And like that does not feel good.
Mm-mm.
Like, let me just tell you, like, first and foremost, like, I know the Lord is good and He does good and all the things, and that shaping is good, but
Yeah.
man, it hurts.
Yeah.
And I don't like it,
Hmm.
right? And but that's what was happening. Like he finally caught my attention
Yeah.
by this song, and I knew that something in my at that point, I didn't know I didn't know it was the control or the
Yeah.
perfectionism in my life. I just thought that there was something that I needed to be better at. See
Yeah.
again?
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought, "Oh, I've gotta be better at something, so the Lord's gonna kinda change me up, and it's gonna be fine." But,
Right.
like, I didn't realize that it was gonna be literally
Hmm.
this this breaking down and tearing down of perfectionism.
So much of self-sufficiency is how can I be stronger?
Oh, yeah. Do better, be
But
better.
then actually scripture says like when I am weak, then I
Yeah.
am strong. Like
Oh.
my grace is sufficient for you in your weakness,
Mhm.
like
Oh, yeah.
that right there is so counterintuitive. And it
Oh,
is
yeah.
counterintuitive. Like in every other area, you learn to feed yourself, you learn to
Mhm.
dress yourself, you learn to walk, you learn to
Yep.
talk, you learn to advocate deeper needs that you have, if like I want to spend time with this friend or
Sure.
my parents or what, like all of these things, and everything is growing more independent.
Yep.
And the Christian walk is totally opposite.
Yes.
So it is hard to see.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, like, we will not find freedom
No,
until we
you
realize
will.
that.
And this idea of trust, the Lord just kept coming back to me like, "Do you trust me?"
Mhm.
Like, "Do you trust me with Jordy? Do you trust me with Piper? Do you trust me with this move? Do you think that I'm gonna provide for you?"
Mhm.
And the answer was like, "Yeah, you should.
Mhm.
I'm this really awesome person who's got it all together, and that's what I deserve, right?"
Mhm.
Like, but the reality is like I didn't understand. Like we were happy where we were,
Mhm.
like it didn't make sense for us to move,
Right.
and it didn't make sense for us to change. But at the same time, the Lord was like, "Do you trust me?"
Yeah.
It's not a maybe or a sometimes or like, yeah, if this is happening or if that is happening,
Yeah.
right? Like, no, it's either you do or you don't, right? It goes back to that like partial, obedience is no
Disobedience. Yeah.
disobedience, right? Like
Mhm.
it's not that. Like it's either you trust me or you don't.
Yeah.
And that was really hard to hear.
And isn't it funny now? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like I can relate to a lot in different ways, but into that self-sufficiency, especially with motherhood. That's pretty
Sure.
much my book in a nutshell. And how to surrender, like and goes through different areas, like in rest and compassion and whatever, all of these things.
Yeah.
But like now on the other side of that, not that I don't have to lay that down all the time and will have to continue to lay that down
Hmm.
while I'm on this earth. But like now I'm like, please don't put it in my control. Like,
Oh,
like I do not like you see everything and I don't. And
yeah.
please you control. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah. It took me a long time to get there.
Yeah.
And at this point in my life, I was not there
Yeah.
because I didn't think that I needed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I just thought like, oh, you know what's good for me, but like, I know what's better.
Well, it's very, very, very hard to see it when you are a capable person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Definitely.
Hey, everybody, I want to interrupt this conversation. I know you are ready to hear what's next. I can't wait to share it with you. For time's sake, we've broken up the episode into a part 2. Make sure you come back next week. You will not want to miss the tips as far as how these things can play out in our relationships, especially pertaining to marriage. These things Andrew and I have been talking about nonstop since having this conversation, so I can't wait for you to hear them. We will see you next week on The Salt Works.
This is my story. This is your story.